How's it going, everyone? So in this video I want to talk about something that I think is obvious in certain ways, maybe not as obvious in other ways or at other times. I want to talk about perspective. So basically that's what life comes down to, perspective, right? I mean, it's all how you're looking at it, whether you're being positive, negative. And this is me coming from a place where right now I'm not particularly in a positive place. So that goes to show I'm a perfect example of what I'm talking about right this very moment. Anyway, so a couple of years ago, I started taking yoga classes, and the book that they recommended that all the new students read was called Journey into Power by a guy named Baron Baptiste. So Baron started a chain of yoga studios in the Los Angeles area at some point, and he had a billionaire come into one of his yoga studios, a self-made billionaire, and he asked this guy how he became a billionaire from scratch. And the billionaire told him that he became as wealthy as he did by mastering all the skill sets related to manipulating his own internal perceptions in a given situation to put himself in an advantageous position based on his own perception in that moment. A term actually that kind of is on point sort of with what I'm talking about, inner engineering. There's this guy, whatever, Sadhguru, whatever, he's like some sort of I don't know, some sort of meditative guy or something. Anyway, but yeah, so in other words, this billionaire became a billionaire by learning how to engineer his internal paradigm, if you will. So I think that's an important detail, you know. But yeah, like for instance, okay, so I today went to two yoga classes back to back, and there's this girl who's the yoga instructor, and I've been pretty much a little bit obsessed with her because she's gorgeous. She's like the dream girl that I never got, basically. And as Tony Robbins says, rejection breeds obsession. Well, there you go. Anyway, so, I did these two yoga classes back to back. And, well, last night I went to a country music show. And this woman named Claire Dunn was performing, country artist that I've never heard of. But, well, I've struggled in the past with, I would say, suppressing emotions and perhaps not having the capacity to fully feel emotions. I was standing in this crowd watching this woman, Claire Dunn, perform, and I'm looking around the audience noticing how like everybody else, or seemingly most other people, were enjoying themselves way, way, way more than me. They were like super into it. They were moving around, they're all dancing, they're getting into it. And I was just standing there. I had, 1.5 beers in me. So maybe it's as simple as that. Maybe those other people were a little drunker. I don't know. But ultimately, the way I was looking at it, the particular way that I was comparing myself was in that sense. I was going, well, probably the reason why this person seems like they're having a better time here than me is because they have a capacity to feel their emotions more fully than I do, because perhaps they had a healthier childhood. So, maybe this person's just emotionally healthier than me, and that's why they're able to feel this to the full extent. And well, I guess I'm out on that one. I can't enjoy it as much as they can because, they're emotionally healthier than me. They had a better childhood than me, so they have a normal capacity to feel emotions, where I'm like emotionally stunted because of the past and blah, 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 blah. So that was the sort of story that was playing out in my head as I was comparing myself to these people in the audience, these other people in the audience who were seemingly enjoying themselves way more than me. And then, yeah, the other side of that coin was also that, or perhaps they're just not suppressing themselves as much as I do. I've had a bad habit through my whole life of suppressing myself. I don't know where it started exactly. Naturally, when I was a kid or something at some point, but yeah, I actually recently got punched in the face at a bar because I made it a point to not suppress myself, to not be treated like a doormat. And this guy punched me, because I was unwilling to suppress myself. In other words, he sort of like confronted me in a way where the options were I have to, I have to get out of his way, or he has to get out of my way. In other words, it's either he has to suppress himself or I have to suppress myself. And I just wasn't willing to do it. And, he didn't suppress himself either because he punched me in the face. So there you go. But anyway, the point is that I was looking at all these people in the crowd, thinking, yeah, maybe they just have a healthier ability to feel things more fully because they had a better childhood, or maybe they just, they didn't develop the bad habit of suppressing themselves in the way that I did when I was younger, and so that's why they're having more fun. That's why they're better at dancing. That's why they're better at connecting to other people. So in the middle of all this, I noticed that Claire, the singer, she comes right up to the front of the stage with her Fender Telecaster, and she basically starts doing a solo to this one person right at the foot of the stage. And then I look at this person that she's performing this solo for, and it was this 20-year-old girl, I would say she's about 20, who was sitting in a motorized wheelchair right at the lip of the stage. And so I'm like looking at that, and I'm like, oh my God, like this girl who's sitting in this wheelchair, in other words, that girl who's sitting in that wheelchair, she's just as human as everybody else in that audience. She wants just as much out of life as everybody else in that audience. She wants the same amount of fame or recognition or love or validation or success or whatever that everybody else in that audience wants. And, ultimately, probably a big part of the reason why a lot of the people in the audience are putting their focus on this chick on the stage, Claire Dunn, other than perhaps, just liking live music and liking music in general and liking country music, is because they respect this person on the stage for the fact that that person is really getting what they want out of life, versus maybe, let's say, they in the audience, they have certain things that they want, they've had certain dreams, maybe they didn't quite live up to it, or maybe they're still in the process of working on it. But, in other words, this chick on the stage, like, she's getting what she wants. And so that's why everybody maybe to some extent gives their, gives their love to that person on stage, gives their attention because they're jealous, they're envious on some level. But then again, maybe that's just me projecting. So, anyway, what I'm really saying is that, I see this girl in the wheelchair, and then it really made it clear that, like, hey, like, your circumstances versus that girl in the wheelchair, you're not doing that bad. Sure, if I compare myself to Dan Bilzerian, I feel like a loser, I go, oh my God, like, I'm not a billionaire. I am not making millions of dollars a year. I'm not famous. I don't get nearly the level of attention from girls that I wish I did. I'm not nearly in the kind of physical shape that I would like to be in. What dude doesn't want to look like a bodybuilder, I'm just a normal dude who's trying to figure out how to deal with the hand that I've been dealt. And anyway, all I'm saying is, when I was comparing myself to these people in the audience, that I was sort of making these assumptions about, maybe they had a better childhood, maybe they have a higher level of emotional capacity because they weren't stunted by negative childhood experiences. Maybe they just don't suppress themselves. Again, it could all just be that maybe they were just drunker than me. It could be that simple. But, so all that is playing out in my head. Then I see this girl that Claire Dunn is performing the solo for in the motorized wheelchair. And I go, oh, wow. So like, I'm not even close to being where I want to be in my life. I don't have a clue what needs to happen for me to get the things that I really want to get out of life most of the time. But ultimately, regardless of all of that, regardless of the fact that maybe I'm not where I want to be in my life right now, and I don't have a lot of the things that I want, well, ultimately, look, I'm not in a wheelchair, And it was kind of hard to see that, because it was like, I simultaneously recognized that while I was seeing this and making that comparison between all these people in the audience versus me versus the girl in the wheelchair, I was kind of aware that probably there's not that many people in the audience that were thinking about that or aware of that contrast in the moment. They were just enjoying themselves, But yeah, again, ultimately, that girl in the wheelchair, she wants to live a full life just as much as anybody else in that audience, including myself. And yet her ability to do so is severely limited, I mean, it's probably very hard for that girl to have romantic relationships, or like that girl will never ever play a guitar, She will never be like Claire Dunn, that super confident chick on a stage just rocking out with her guitar and controlling that whole audience. The girl in the wheelchair is never going to do that. That's not going to happen for her in her life. That's a fact. And it is sad. It's sad. And by that same token, there are certain things that I'm never going to have. There are certain things that I'm never going to do that I wish I was going to do. There are certain things that are really hard to accept based on the hand that I've been dealt in life. But ultimately, it is all perspective. It's all how you look at it. You can choose to look at it like, well, in simplistic terms, basically, you can choose to focus on what you don't have, or you can choose to focus on what you do have. So, your options are basically either do the best you can with the hand that you've been dealt, in spite of the fact that maybe those options are limited, or be pissed off about the fact that you don't have more options, you don't have more resources to do whatever you're trying to do. So there's a couple terms that are right down this alley, to just put it into simplistic terms. A lot of the progressive people, the new age people, have probably heard these terms. But you've got scarcity mindset and abundance mindset. So that's a way that you could look at it. In other words, another way you could look at it is be positive, be negative, So scarcity mindset, essentially you're focusing on all the things you don't have. You're focusing on your shortcomings based on the hand that you have been dealt. Abundance mindset, you're focusing on the things you do have, even if the things you have are limited by comparison to others, or limited by comparison to perhaps what you think you need to have in order to make the things you want to have happen. Scarcity mindset is basically just focusing on the lack of things in your life. Abundance mindset is focusing on, being grateful for what you do have. So it's basically gratefulness versus, depression because of perceived victimhood or something, But what I'm really trying to point out here is that everything is perspective. All of life is perspective. All of life is mental, for the most part. Unless you're a bodybuilder or an athlete, pretty much life is mental. Even people who are athletes, they themselves admit that the only thing that makes the difference when you get to the highest level of competition is the mental game, because effectively everybody has the same physical mastery of that particular skill. Take, for instance, 20 of the highest level skateboarders in the world. Okay, well, they've all been skating for 25 years, every day, 8 hours a day. So what makes a difference between the guy who comes in first, the guy who comes in second, the guy who comes in third? A lot of times it's just a mental game. Another example would be fighters, mixed martial artists, jiu-jitsu practitioners, or even yoga. You take a bunch of people who are at the highest level of that skill and put them in the same room. Well, what's going to make the difference between the people who can do certain things versus the people who cannot do those things? It's mental, generally. So it's mental performance that's giving them that slight edge that puts them just barely ahead of the pack because they have perhaps a little bit more control over their mind or their perspective of their skills and their abilities and the hand that they've been dealt and the amount of work that they put in or the amount of work they still have to put in to get to wherever they think they want to end up or wherever they think they can end up. So anyway, the point of this video was to be aware that perspective is a massive, massive player in everybody's lives, whether you're acknowledging it or not. The same principle applies in storytelling, really in any form. Music, movies, really any form of storytelling. You can tell any story from multiple perspectives. You know, you can tell, or a good example would be like the movies U571 versus the movie Das Boot. So in other words, Das Boot is basically the same story from the perspective of the Germans, and the movie U571 is the same story from the perspective of the Americans. So what I'm saying is that really any story can be told from the perspective of the bad guy, the perspective of the good guy, the perspective of this country versus that country. So in storytelling, perspective is huge as well, because you can tell any story from any perspective. You can, just like you can tell your own story to the outside world that you're interacting with on a daily level from multiple perspectives. You can tell your story to the world from the perspective of a victim or from the perspective of a winner, depending on what you are choosing or not choosing out of habit to identify with. And I know this is all easier said than done. Trust me, I myself struggle from one day to the next to maintain a grip on, the key points when it comes to all this kinds of stuff, to the degree that I can apply it in a practical way to have a more positive daily experience. So I'm not above, having bad days any more than anybody else is. But I just wanted to put that out there that I think you really have to be aware of how much power perspective has, even on the on the bad days and on the good days. You got to remember on the good days, hey, be grateful for the fact that this is a good day because tomorrow might be a bad day. And on the bad days, you got to always sort of, take it with a grain of salt, knowing that, yeah, all right, today sucks, but you know what, tomorrow will come and I will probably feel better tomorrow. Probably. And if I don't feel better tomorrow, I'll probably feel better the day after that. So that's my 2 cents. I hope my perspective on perspective was beneficial to you guys and girls, and I hope you have a good rest of the evening or morning or day or night or whatever time it might be for any of you out there who are watching this. So thanks for listening, and I'll do my best to get some more content out there for you as quick as I can. I've been pretty busy lately, but I'm working on it. So stay tuned.